This video was produced by Boulder Digital Arts. BDA offers affordable, cutting-edge classes and workshops for designers, entrepreneurs, and tech professionals. All of their programs are taught by industry experts. And as a small local business, they're proud to have supported Boulder's creative and technology community for well over a decade. BDA's classes cover a wide range of subjects, from digital marketing and video production to web development and graphic design. Learn more at boulderdigitalarts.com.
So yeah, thanks for coming tonight. And Bruce, you didn't tell me this was going to be recorded, so my attorney, Michael Avenatti, will be in touch with you shortly. That's not true. Actually, tonight's title actually comes from a client of mine who's been with me for a number of years, and he's a character, and he's this very hard-charging gentleman of Indian descent. And he called me when he said, "Doyle, I need you right now. We have to do a PR." I said, "A PR, Satyan? What do you?" We've been working together for 4 years. I do a lot of PR for you. He said, "Oh, press release." I thought, oh God, I have to start from scratch with this guy. So what I want to talk about tonight, and I hope you all kind of come away with maybe some tips and tricks you can use in your own business, but just kind of an overview of kind of the changing media landscape. And when I started in this business in 1984 or something like that, literally, my job was to kind of put together press releases, and then we would print them off. I worked for Coors then. You'd walk over to the print shop and they'd run off 600 copies on letterhead, and you'd mail out 600 copies of a press release. And then you'd go home tired because you put out a press release and it took all day. And then you kind of waited. You waited like 4 or 5 days, and then you start calling reporters like, "Hi, did you get my press release in the mail?" And that's kind of what we did to a large degree. And that has changed so dramatically. I mean, if my staff looked at me and I said, "What'd you do today?" And they said, "I put out a press release." I was like, "Okay, now it's 8:15. What did you do for the rest of the day?" It's just, it's much more quick. So things have changed quite a bit. So I want to kind of start with, why should you bother with what we call public relations, which does not mean press release, it's public relations. And it's different today than it's ever been. But I always like to remind people that if you don't manage your reputation, somebody will do it for you. Right? So why is Michael Avenatti, kidding aside, on TV every 15 minutes? Because he's managing his reputation. He doesn't want Rudolph Giuliani to do it for him. PR is also fairly low cost and fairly high credibility. I mean, think about, somebody toss out a magazine they like to read. Anyone?
Playboy.
Oh, what's that? Playboy? Yeah. You don't buy it for the ads, right? Great example, Don. Thank you.
Scientific American.
Yeah, but even Scientific Americans. But who among us takes home Scientific American and goes, "I can't wait to see who's advertising this month." It's a necessary evil, if you will, but you buy it for the articles, except for Playboy. That was just knocked out. That was easy. And that's what you want to do with public relations. We're going to talk about how to become part of the editorial versus buying a full-page ad. Both are good. Both are effective means of communications, but PR is different. You get a great chance to distinguish yourself from your competitors. So what makes you different? Why is your company different? You got a great chance to tell that story. It's a great way to attract investors or partners or employees or clients or customers. I did public relations for a hard disk drive company that was actually headquartered in San Francisco, but had their engineering here. And this was half of what we did here. There's only so many head tribologists in this world, and we did a lot of public relations here in Colorado just so people would pick up the phone and answer when our headhunters called, because we were trying to cherry pick from Western Digital and all of our competitors. So a lot of different things you can do. And if any of you are ever unlucky enough to work for a public company, there are legal reasons when you have to do press releases and other things. So there's some regulatory requirements to go around it. But I always like to kick things off kind of a little bit on the lighter side and show what happens if you don't prepare for your public relations activities very well. They're not always that bad, though. One of my favorite stories, though, is I spent some time with Coors, and I got to do an interview one day with Ira Glass, if any of you are fans of This American Life. And you can just hear his voice now in your head, right? He's the nicest guy. And we'd media trained the person that he was interviewing so well that there was no emotion in Ben's voice. And so Ira started to just almost pull a Ruth Corley on tape. I mean, we weren't live, but he was on tape. And I'm kind of sitting back as the PR guy going, "Jesus, what's going on here?" And he pulled me aside afterwards and he said, "Listen, this guy's great, but he said, I had to put some emotion in his voice, so I had to piss him off a little bit. And so it was, so, you know, life flashing before your eyes there a little bit as the PR guy. But when you think about, and we're going to talk about some things, as I said, that, you know, even if you've got your own business, you're a sole proprietor, you can do some things that you can do on your own. But one of the things that I love about PR is that literally one call can earn you media coverage if you do it right. We're going to talk about some of that. We talked about cost effective. You can reach thousands, even millions of people with the right message and a little luck. So I'll tell a story. We have a client that we're having a lot of fun with right now called Vaisala, and they're based out of Helsinki, Finland, and they make all sorts of monitoring equipment. We work with the weather group, and they happen to make the things, you know, when those guys fly over hurricanes and they drop in the sensors? Those are called drop sounds. Well, my client makes those and makes, I think, almost everyone in the world. And they're about this big and about yay big around. They kind of look like bombs. And so we were at their offices in Louisville a few weeks ago, and we're starting to talk about, okay, it's hurricane season coming up. What are some cool ideas that we can get Vaisala out there as experts in weather? And they had one of these things sitting around. I said, can I have 20 of those? And they said, no, why? It's like, wait, what? And I said, seriously, how much are those? And they're like $400 a piece. I said, well, can you take like most of the guts out of them, or certainly take the batteries out? But seriously, I want to send those to the media and say, look, this is a cool prop and you can talk about it. And so it's all these PhDs in meteorology. They're like, that's stupid. Nobody wants to do it. I said, well, no. I said, you guys play with these every day? I've never seen one. I think that's really cool. So they begrudgingly gave me 20 of these things. And we're now talking to Al Roker's producer, who I think is going to wave one around on the Today Show. One was on the Weather Channel earlier this week. Good Morning America's talking to us. So it's just coming up with kind of a cute and clever idea that, you know, gives people something that they can play with. So we are out of our 20. I had one in my office, and I got a panic call from my staff the other day. I said, where's that drop sound? I said, it's in my office. I said, did you mess with it? No, we want to send it to the Weather Channel. So we did. So you can really have a big impact. But I want to talk a little bit about how the media landscape has changed. And so what is public relations? And as I told my friend Satya, and it's not press release. But I stopped it there because when I started in this industry, public relations really meant media relations for the most part. You did some events, you did some things, but for the most part, our job was to go to newspapers, magazines, radio stations, TV stations, and try to get them to tell our client's story through press releases for the most part and some interviews and whatnot. And now we're going to fill the slide up with what it looks like today, because it's completely different. Now we have this beast, right? We've got a stat coming up later on that tells how many people get their news from Facebook. It will make your stomach turn, but we'll get there in a moment. Think about your own, what we call owned media, blog posts. I mean, think about media outlets like TechCrunch. What is TechCrunch? It's a blog. TechCrunch has never put ink to paper, and they probably never will. So think about what you can do with your own blog from a public relations standpoint. There's always crisis communications. I worked for Coors for 10 years. I'm an expert at crisis communications, let me tell you. One of my favorite stories of all time, I was sitting with Bill Coors, who is now 102 years old, so I can't decide if I feel really old or not, but this is how old I am. So USA Today was doing a series of stories to celebrate their 5th anniversary, and I was already out of college, so that's how old I am. But so we had pitched them on the idea. Coors used to do, I think still does this really cool event called Barley Field Days. And they would go out and celebrate in these small towns in Montana and on the western slope of Colorado. And it was the tradition that a Coors family member would go out and barbecue for all the barley farmers. And it was a big family thing, 40, 50 people there. So I pitched USA Today. They were doing kind of cool Americana things in each state. And I pitched USA Today on this idea, and they loved it. They flew a reporter out from DC. I picked him up at Old Stapleton. We drove to Center, Colorado. We get out there, and there's Bill Coors, who's probably late 60s, early 70s at the time. And he's wearing his cowboy hat, and he's flipping burgers for people and drinking beer and having a good time. So we go sit down at a picnic table about like this, and it was me and Bill sitting next to each other. And this reporter from USA Today was a really nice guy. And Bill sits down and says, you know, we're here to talk about Barley Field Days, but before we start, can I tell you what a bunch of goddamn crooks I think the American Medical Association is? I had a Ruth Corley moment right there, right? And I literally kicked him under the table. And Bill looked at me, and he looked at the reporter, and he looked back at me, and he said, well, I must be onto something good. My PR guy just kicked me under the table. Not the answer I was searching for. So he went on for 5 minutes about some kind of therapy that he liked to do that the AMA didn't like. And so then we got to barley field days and da-da-da. So like 2 hours later, and he talked to a bunch of barley farmers. And about 2 hours later, we get back in the car and the door shut, and I looked at him, I said, do you want to walk to Denver, or are we going to forget all about chelation therapy here for a while? And this reporter looked at me and he said, you know, I don't even know where to fit that into the story. No, I'm not going to hang you out to dry. But he said, it was worth driving out here just to see the look on your face when that was going on. So, but yeah, I mean, we had one day, I'm not making this up, one day at Coors, within 2 hours of each other, somebody left a valve on, flooded Clear Creek and killed a bunch of fish. That wasn't good. And a body floated up on our property. That a guy had an accident way up the creek, rafting and came. So yeah, it's never ending. So every now and then my client will call me and say, "Oh my God, this is going on." It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Been there, seen that. This is a really important part I'm going to talk about a lot tonight, but contributed content. And what I mean by that is bylined articles in publications, guest blog posts for other people's blogs, that kind of thing. More important than ever, we're going to talk about why that is in the media, but literally, if I had called USA Today 10 years ago and said, "Hi, can I do a bylined article for you?" They'd have put my picture up in the newsroom with a note that says, "Don't take calls from this idiot." And within the last couple of years, we've gotten contributed content for our clients in USA Today. So we'll talk about that. So it's out there, it's available. I mean, pick up the Daily Camera. I mean, my friend Dave Taylor writes a monthly column that's just contributed content. They are desperate for content because they don't have enough reporters to do things. In fact, and I love the Camera. I've got a lot of good friends there, so I'm not picking on them, but there are times when I have to call and say, I've got this story. They say, that's great. And I said, you got to send Shay, you got to send Jared, you got to send this is a CEO that's in his 50s. If you send me a 19-year-old intern from CU, he'll lose his mind. I'll wait on the story, but don't do that. But that's how thin the newsroom has gotten these days, which opens up opportunities. Pitching story ideas. Hi, would you like to see what a drop sound looks like? But even think about it within your own realm here. If you're on a daycare center, for example, one of my favorite examples is if a storm's coming, a blizzard's coming, we know school's going to be closed, or we think school's going to be closed, and you have a daycare center and you call up and say, "Hey, I'm an expert in childcare. I could come on and do 5 minutes on 5 things that you can do with your child for free on a snow day." Chances are on a slow news day, you're going to be in the newsroom on TV talking about that. So they're looking for story ideas like that. One of the funny little secrets of network news, so think Channel 9, which is the NBC affiliate here in town, NBC will tell them, you've heard the phrase because of the Sinclair coverage, if you've seen that, must carries. So when NBC's putting out a movie of the week on anorexia, they will tell the local affiliates they want them to do some news articles that week on anorexia. So if you watch and see what's coming up on the network news cycle or the network entertainment cycles and pitch the local station that goes into the same thing, if you happen to be a psychologist, a flim-flam artist. I have to be careful, I'm married to a psychotherapist, so hello. It was just jokes, baby. But there's just huge opportunities there. I have clients that I think I can think of 2 clients I've never sent a press release out for. We literally just pitch story ideas and pitch contributed content. We get them lots of coverage, and they hang around with us. Speaking opportunities, that's PR too. Look at talking to you fine people tonight. This is a great way for me to tell you about my business and what I do, and it's a lot of fun. And Bruce bought me wine, so it worked out really well. So I want to go over a little bit about why today and why not 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So this delightfully depressing line is the paid circulation of daily newspapers that way up the top there when we were almost at 65,000 on average per paper. That was 1985. Now we're at 35,000. So we've cut more than in half in my professional career. So this isn't even since 1862 or something when Bruce started. But the good news is, if there's kind of a good shadow side here, news consumption is staying fairly the same. But I really want to point this out because I think these demographics are really interesting. So let's look at daily newspapers, which is where a lot, the majority of the population got their kind of daily news for the longest time. The most likely to read them today, this is from a Pew study from about 2 years ago, are those with more education, more income, and are white. So if you're trying to sell to somebody that's a 26-year-old Hispanic millennial, how do you reach them with your news? Because they aren't doing this. But this really freaked me out. I was blown away by this. 56% of those who consume a newspaper read it exclusively in print. They don't go online, they don't do this. So, I mean, you're starting to really see the division here in the way people are consuming news. 11% of these people read it on desktop or laptop computers. 5% read it on mobile. And only just about 1 in 10 read it print, desktop, mobile, kind of like, hey, I'll just take it wherever I can get it. So that begs the question, it's like, where are we getting our news? So I apologize for the eye chart, so I'll kind of go through this, but these are monthly unique visitors from about 6 months ago for these popular news sites in millions. So you can see CNN, 112 monthly unique visitors on average, give or take. And these are not exclusive, by the way. So you could visit 10 of these and you get counted as long as you're a unique visitor. New York Times is right up there. But look at some of the ones that are really, Yahoo News is still up there and really doing well. And in fact, Yahoo Finance is right here. BuzzFeed, another one that is never going to print ink. USA Today's hanging inside. Business Insider is an online publication. So you can see there's a really strong mix here of kind of digital native publications along with names that we've kind of known and trust for years. This one, I always like to point out, the Wall Street Journal's way down here at only 25 million, right? My theory on that is the Wall Street Journal since day one has had a paywall that's been very successful, and they've always been profitable with their digital product. I think that's kept them from getting the big numbers. They don't care. They're fat and happy down here. But you can see, I mean, some of the things the fact that BuzzFeed has 3 times what the Los Angeles Times does, is it any wonder? I'll just let that go. But you can see that the unique visitors are going up slightly. This is from 14 to 16. But this next slide really, I think, tells a story too. Look what's starting to happen from 14 to 16. The page visits are going up, and the time on page, it's not a huge decline, but it's declining. We're consuming less news, and we're going through it like this. So we got to learn to grab our readers' attention really quickly. So this next slide has some of my most sad stats and some of my favorite stats all at the same time.
Can I just ask something on the left?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, go right ahead. Yeah.
So I get that statistic, but then if you look at how they divvy up the news, and so they put a little piece on a different page. So it makes me go through a slideshow because they can put various ads around it every single time. Is that reflective of that?
That is, and that's a really good point. And they do that for 2 reasons. One, to put more ads around it, and one, because the more page visits you get when you go to a site, the better it is for your SEO. But if you think about like a New York Times and a lot of those really big ones, CNN, you can just scroll and see the whole thing. So that could be influencing that to some degree. Everything else that kind of around this is telling us that, yeah, we're going faster and faster. In fact, the next slide will pay that off, but that's a really, really good point. Doesn't that drive you all crazy? You get someplace that's a slideshow. I want to know 8 things about the Brady Bunch I never saw, but I'm not going to click 26 times to get there. I get so frustrated. Make my staff print it out for me. No, I don't. So 39 out of 50 news sites, those ones that we saw, get more traffic from mobile devices than desktop computers and desktop laptop, traditional computers, right? But only 10 of 50 mobile visitors spend more time than their desktop counterparts. So we're back to, I got the headline, I read the first 2 sentences, I'm good to go. So we're seeing more and more of that. This one makes me kind of sad. Nearly half of web-using adults report getting news about politics and government the past week on Facebook, and 87% of them are on mobile devices. So you can just see this kind of chain coming up here of, I'm standing in line at the DMV and I read 12 news articles, I'm good to go. But I love this one, actually. I think this is a kind of an up-and-coming thing, that their monthly podcast audience from NPR is now up to 15.5 million unique visitors and 82 million downloads each month. And I'm like, yeah, real journalism. What do you know? I actually have kind of a theory on NPR. I think they're setting themselves up in a good way here. So, every year we hear about, why are we funding NPR? We should get rid of that. And we've had presidential campaigns kind of based on that for years. And they get a very small portion of their budget from the feds anymore. A lot more comes from underwriting. But what's really interesting about this is if you look at the average public radio station, kind of across the board, roughly 10 to 12% of their reported Arbitron audiences are donators, or they are subscribers, if you will, right? So 10% of their audience, a really good station gets 15%, really average gets 7 or 8%. So what if they just quit broadcasting and said, that's it, but you got to pay for podcasts now? And let's say they cut their audience by 2/3, just in theory. But now you're at 30% subscriber, right, from your original audience. Because your audience went down by 2/3, but you have to pay to play. And I think it's just a matter of time. We're already starting to see, like This American Life, you can get the current episode for free, but if you want to go back, you have to start paying 99 cents for it. We're starting to see little bits and pieces. So I think NPR is kind of setting themselves up for the day when the feds pull the plug. They got a plan. Don't worry, Ira's safe. So what does all this numbers crap mean to why public relations is changing? Here's newsroom employment. I couldn't get the most recent numbers. I'm sure it's sadly down here. We're all living that here in Boulder and in Denver. But in the United States in 2004, 65,000-ish people said they work at a newsroom. Today that number's, 2014, 15, that number's way down. Denver Post, I'm going to get the numbers close. 2010, they had 210 reporters. With the last round of layoffs, they're at 65, I believe. Stunning. And yet they made $19 million for their hedge fund owners last year. So that buys you a few reporters. But I will tell you, Tamara Chung, who writes business, is one of the last of the Mohicans there writing business. I call her, and she's actually got a cutoff. She will not report on a VC investment of less than $10 million. She said, I don't have the time. There's too many. $3 million, that's a lot of money. I call her and say, hey, one of my clients got a $3 million investment. She goes, good. Call me when they get 7 more. And we're friends. She sat on panels with me. But that's how thin the paper's gotten. I've literally had reporters at the Post, I'll call them with a story and they'll say, I love this story. Do yourself a favor, call the Denver Business Journal if they don't want to call me back, because they can give it the space that it needs. I'm limited to 8, 10 column inches. That's all I can give you. That's literally the state of journalism. So there's some good news to that for your own business. U.S. magazines, I couldn't find this advertising age study I really trust, and I couldn't find past 2013, but again, same thing. 140,000 people working at the Times and the Fast Companies and Scientific American and Playboy and all those places. And that number's dropping. And it's going down, I promise you. So what that means is they still have pages to fill. So does anybody know how a newspaper is determined? Like, is a newspaper 20 pages a day or 25? Do you know how that's determined? Anybody know? They try to be about 50% ads. So if they sell a ton of ads, there's a ton of space to fill in there. It's not, the newspaper is not determined by how much news there is. It's determined by how many ads the ad department sells. If they sell fewer ads, less space, right? Well, they're not selling fewer ads. They're selling more ads for less money, but they're trying to fill those papers. So same thing with a magazine. They try to run 40 to 50% advertising. So somebody's got to fill those pages when the ad department's out there selling. And that's where y'all come in, and people like me. So we've got, despite the fact I think this is sad for our society, and I don't mean to make light of it, there are some really good opportunities to get some coverage and to help these folks out a little bit. So some of the ways that you can do that, and we'll talk about each one of these in a little bit more detail. First, you can develop content and create your own news. So it's everything from story ideas to developing content. We'll talk more about that. We'll talk about repurposing. One news story idea can become an infographic and a news story and a blog post and an email article and all sorts of things. We'll talk about being the publisher and getting your own stuff out there. Because again, a lot of times, I think a lot of times we watch what's viral, right? And Pepsi does something and they get 2 million likes. Your business and most of my clients in the B2B space don't need 2 million likes. In fact, 200 likes of the right 200 people could be worth tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in new business. So big consumer packaged goods are very different than what we need to do in our own businesses, and especially if we're in the B2B space. And then we'll talk about linking and some SEO and a little bit of that, because PR can really help out with your search engine optimization. So let's talk about some of the ways that we can develop and create our own news. And we've touched on some of these, but I want you all to think about contributed content, because there's just an unbelievable opportunity out there, both in blogs to do contributed blog posts that link back to your own blog, dragging that person's audience along with it, but also in, like I said, places you'd never expect. USA Today, for example, is now taking contributed content. So let's talk about what that means. That nobody's going to take a contributed piece that's like, hey, I'd like to write 800 words about why I'm the best PR firm in the Rocky Mountain region, and then I'll conclude with some nice things. But I could call and say, I want to give you 5 ways that you can get publicity for your own company. And then at the bottom, it's going to say Doyle is president and CEO of MAPR, and then I get a link back. So it is truly a kind of a thought leadership kind of thing. But you've all got the opportunity to do that, and you can do, if you just get a little bit creative about it, there's so many things you can do. So one of my favorite stories is we did some pro bono work for the Denver Rescue Mission, and they've got a facility in Wellington, Colorado, just outside of Fort Collins called The Farm. And I want to say they accept something like 24 men at a time. It's a men's facility, and it is a 18 to 24 month program for, I mean, people that go there this is kind of the last stop. So it's really intense. But it's truly a working farm, and there's some research out that shows that the discipline of an agricultural lifestyle is really good to treat addiction, because the cow's got to be fed at 5, and all these kind of things. So, but the long and short of it's a real working farm. They cut deals with restaurants in Fort Collins who feature what they grow on the menu, the farm to table kind of things. So we went to the Fort Collins Coloradoan and said, it's, when you think about news, it's like, could you come out and do a feature article on the farm? They'll probably say yes once, but you can't call them back in a year and go, you haven't covered the farm for a year. It's like, well, what's new and different? Nothing, same guys, we're growing stuff and great, but I can't cover that again. But what we did is went to them and said, look, what we have is the counselors there are not only experts in addiction recovery, but they're also true working farmers and master gardeners. So could we do a monthly column that would, in the springtime, it's like how to prepare your garden for, planting season, and how do you do this, and how do you get the most out of this, and what to do if your soil's in bad shape. And so we came up with this whole editorial calendar, and we did a monthly column for the Fort Collins, Colorado. And then at the bottom it was, Bob is a master gardener at the farm, and da-da-da-da, and here's our website. Unbelievably successful. And then they would let us sneak in every now and then. They do a big festival every October, and they have kids come out for tours, and they do this whole really cool thing where they grow all the parts to a pizza, and then the kids get to eat the pizza at the end. But so they'll kind of let us do a little self-serving one, because we did 11 for them that were totally, where are we going to find master gardeners to give us good, solid, contributed content? And then you got somebody like my company coming in to make sure it's an AP style, it's well written. It's, you told me, if they say 600 words, we don't deliver 1,800, because I couldn't trim any. They were just all so wonderful. So, think about where you could do things like that. And even in community newspapers are really, really hard up for stuff like that. I have friends that review bands because they just like to go out to live music, and then they get free tickets, right? I'm reviewing for the Boulder Weekly. Infographics. And so I'm lucky enough to have 2 artists on my staff, but infographics are something that, and USA Today really made these famous, right? When the bottom right-hand corner of the front page of every section has some little infographic in there. Fast Company did a great job with them. But there are some wonderful tools that are kind of freemium tools. PictoChart comes to mind, pictochart.com, and it's spelled where it's like P-I-K-T-O chart. But there's a handful of these where you can literally drag and drop and make your own infographics. And so again, you think about, what could I do that I could make a cool infographic out of? So I'll go back to my client Vaisala. They have one of the world's most advanced lightning detection systems. And so we did an infographic that's just getting ready to come out that shows the most lightning strikes in the top 5 most visited national parks, and sent it out to do, hey, it's lightning, be aware. If Grand Canyon, by the way, Grand Canyon gets the most lightning strikes of any national park. They call them strokes. which is, they call them lightning strokes, and they correct us all the time. And then we send things out, and reporters call us and go, "You spelled strike wrong." It's like, no, we didn't. No, it's a stroke if you knew what you were doing. Guy that does weather on the 10s, you're going to tell me how to do this? So infographics are great. Surveys are another really cool opportunity. So we use surveys in a few different ways, and it can help you with your business, and I'll tell you a story of a survey. So the media loves to do surveys, but again, when the newsroom is this thin, I don't have time to go out and do a bunch of surveys. So we had a really big cybersecurity client, and so the iPad was introduced in 2010, and in about 2012, 2013, there was this trend in the media that we noticed, and they were all talking about the BYOD phenomenon, bring your own device. Right? So in 2008, 2009, even the CEO walked into a big company and they said, here's your shitty Dell computer. You don't have admin privileges. If you want more software, call IT. Don't touch anything. Just type. That's what you do. Well, now all of a sudden you got the C-suite in 2012, 2013 going, I want this iPad on the network, right? So all the articles were talking about the financial implications. So what do? Do you give people a stipend and let them buy whatever they want that the company owns? If they want to buy something nicer, they can put in their own money. What do you do? And about paragraph 7 or 8 in all these stories, it would say, oh, and by the way, this presents security problems to the IT department. And then they'd just move merrily on. And we went, nobody's really talking about what those security problems are. So I went to my client, and we did, using SurveyMonkey, by the way, which is a great free service, but they also have great paid services that are really pretty inexpensive a lot of times. So we did a survey, and I think it cost $1,500. This is a big company. But we went out to 500 people. We identified 500 business people who the only qualification was you couldn't be in IT, middle management or above, and you had to have either a smartphone or a tablet device hooked up to your company network, at least through email. That was the minimum. And then we asked them a series of questions. I went to my client, and it's always kind of gut check time. So you go to your client and go, if it comes back and everything's really cool, we might not have a story here. What the headline we were able to write from the survey is that of these 500 people, one in 2 of their devices did not have so much as a simple passcode on it. So it's hooked to the company network, and if I leave it here in the airport and you pick it up, guess what you can do? You can send email from me and do all sorts of things, right? So it was, and it got worse from there. I mean, there was no security protocol. And then so the results were so bad, in fact, we did a follow-on survey with IT departments, like, what are you doing about mobile security? They're like, beats the hell out of us. It's like, we hope everybody's doing the right thing. So we were able to put this together. So we sent out a news release, turned it into an infographic, and it was like, we sent it out at 6 a.m. Colorado time, 8 a.m. Eastern time. I think it was on Mashable at like 8:07 Eastern time. We were inundated. We got so much coverage. The AP picked it up. And then, so it was so good, then we went back to the client and said, why don't we do a really big white paper for the security experts and put it on your website and make people register their email to pull down the 3,500-page white paper, which we did. And long story short, it was such a big deal. It was our kind of a big fall PR push 3 years in a row. And it never got any better. It's marginally better, but like it was 1 out of 2 the first year. And then I think the second year was like 47% of people. It was like 50, 51%, and it was down to 47. I think year 3, it was like 38% still said I don't have a passcode on my smartphone. And it's like, geez, I don't want my kids to touch it. Yeah.
I may have missed this, but who was your client that you were doing that pitch for, survey? And
it was a cybersecurity firm. So they did everything from penetration testing to remediation to all that kind of stuff. So then the third paragraph of the news release, it was smart words from the cybersecurity firm, and they came back to me. Their average engagement was about $150,000, and they told me they got at least 10 clients out of this thing on year 1. So I said, cool, I'm just going to send you a bill once a month and not do shit for the rest of the year. Because I've covered my nut here, folks. So, no, but even on a lesser scale, and certainly you don't have to pay money for it, but the media loves surveys. And if you can go out and, so a lot of times we'll go out and say, let's go survey a bunch of your customers, because your customers are going to give us something. And what a great opportunity. And if we do your customers, Oh, and some people that you would like to be your customers, what a great introduction. And we'll kind of do that for you and we'll talk about it. And then you offer to send everybody, oh, we'll send you a copy of the report before we make it public, before it goes out. So you can take these PR tactics and turn them into kind of business development tactics too. Story pitches, I think we've talked about quite a bit, but just, what's coming up? What are you an expert in? What's going to make sense? Is there something that I can comment on that really makes sense? And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a PhD in anything. You can call up and say, look, this thing's going to happen. I happen to have this, even, if you own a tire store and it's like, hey, here's the 3 things people should know about tires going into winter. I mean, there's reporters out there going, I don't know shit about tires. That sounds good to me. The other thing we need to remember about reporters is 2010, there were, I want to say, either 8 or 9 business reporters at the Denver Post. So somebody wrote manufacturing, somebody wrote tech, somebody wrote healthcare, somebody wrote this. Now it's like, this guy has manufacturing, tech, healthcare, and if the basketball writer's sick, he has to go cover the Nuggets, right? So they don't have this Rolodex full of experts. So when news breaks, to go back to my cybersecurity client, the day that the Target hack happened, we picked up the phone, just didn't even call a client, we just called the AP and said, do you want an expert to tell what we think happened? They're like, oh God, yes, thank you. This poor person was like, so my editor walked in and said, go, cover the Target hack. And it's like, okay, and so next day we're in 200 newspapers. So people love that. Yeah, done.
When are you annoying to them and you're bugging them too much? And do you have a filter as to when you bother them versus when you're just noise?
It's a great question. It's more art than science. I wish there was after 3 calls, do this. But a couple of things I will say: if you can get a relationship built, they will call you. I just did a couple of days of media training. If you've been around Denver for a while, you remember a guy named Neil Brown who was on Channel 9 for years. And he talks about Dr. Soundbite. And it was a guy that worked at Rose Medical Center, I believe. And whenever it was like, flu epidemic, it's like, call Dr. Soundbite. And the guy would come down the stairs, meet him on the front lawn so they didn't have to park. Here you go. And boom, they go back and edit the tape. But I think if it's a thoughtful pitch, and this is where the art and science comes in, but I'll use another Visal example. So Hurricane Irma is bearing down on Florida, right? It's about 24 hours out. What I've learned working for this client is that the lightning in a hurricane is at the front of the storm. So when people are out there pounding up plywood, that's when they get struck by lightning, because the lightning wall is at the front of the storm. So we're pitching into Irma. So Irma's starting to make landfall. It's a Friday afternoon in Denver. My staff was cracking up at me. I called KOA, called into the newsroom. I didn't say who I was with, anything else. I called up, they picked up and said, hi, KOA. I said, hey, local company, lightning expert on hurricanes, willing to talk. Would you need something to go into your newscast? Hold on, I'll start the tape. I mean, literally, that's how, they're just like, oh God, yeah. I said, no, it's not me. Let me get Kevin Petty on the phone for you. But it's, you can kind of, you'll tell that. I mean, one of my favorite stories, Don, is, and this is really morbid, but it's so true. Chris Olinger, who was a producer at KOA for years, was talking to a bunch of PR pukes about this size. And this was 3 or 4 days before they were going to execute Timothy McVeigh. And she said, let me tell you how my news cycle brain works, and this will answer your question. She goes, if you call me in the next 72 hours and you don't represent the straps that are holding him, the table he's laying on, the needle they're sticking him with, the syringe that the needle's hooked to, don't call me, right? So the media is like a little kid soccer team. Nobody plays position. They all just run to the ball, and the ball goes over here, and there they go. And then that's how their jobs work. So if you can get your head around that and go, if you call, when if there's a blizzard going on, and you call and say, hey, can I talk to you about 3 great recipes? Shut up. But if you call and say there's a blizzard going on, and I have something that goes into that news cycle or that news story, you're going to be welcome. And then then you can get out of that really rapid fire news cycle and just go, hey, there's a whole trend coming out about, I know you work in video, so maybe there's a whole bunch of new video cameras coming out, to call and say, hey, I could come on and do 5 minutes to really give your consumers or your viewers some guidance on, here's what you need this one for, here's what you need this one for. If you're not doing this or this, don't waste your money. This one does just fine. You probably got a good shot at getting some action going there. Why do we see Floyd Cerulli on Channel 9 every time there's an election? Because he's good, they know him, they trust him. Once you get in there, it works really well. My cybersecurity client was like, I can't take any more calls. I have a business to run. Does that answer your question? I wish I could say it's 4.3 and between there and there, but it's kind of, you'll get the feel. Fair warning, you're going to get hung up on, you're going to get called names. I mean, it's like doing sales. But sometimes you get, I'll start the tape, and it's like, yeah, I did it. Yeah.
How do you know who to call? You said you have your reporter friends, but the average person would call them.
Yeah, it's a great question. So think about who covers what you're doing. So, I think a lot of people are like, I'm going to call Gary Shapiro because he's on TV every morning at 6 and he seems nice. So in TV stations, you want to call what's called an assignment desk. And if you just call, I think it's 871-9999 still for Channel 9, and just say, I want to talk to the assignment desk, you will get somebody whose job it is to take those calls and say, I would like to tell you about something. Assignment desks tend to be like, I have an event at 2 o'clock today, I'd like to let you know about it kind of thing. But otherwise, call the reporter that's covering what it is that you do. So Google's your friend in this case. So if you are in real estate, go Google who is the real estate reporter for the Denver Post. And they actually still have, like at the bottom, it's like, here's their email, here's their phone number. And you can usually get their direct line. And then you call them and you say, here's what I want, here's what I want to offer you, here's why I'd like to do this. And reporters also like it when you can say, I saw that you covered X and Y, and I thought you might also like this. We go into that all the time. So also, let social media be your friend. If there's a reporter that's really covering your industry and you think that he or she's doing good work, are they on Twitter? Follow them. Like their stuff, retweet. I got a hit for a client the other day because I retweeted something from Tamara Chung, and it was like pure serendipity. And I retweeted it because I liked it. But I was, messing around on Twitter, taking a break, and I retweeted something from Tamara, and it was like 3, 2, 1, my phone rang. She goes, Doyle, Tamara, thanks for the retweet. And oh, by the way, I've been meaning to call you. Do you have a client that does X? I was like, I do. She's like, cool, can I talk to him? So it was just that quick reminder. But reporters pay attention to who tweets at them. We've gotten story hits by tweeting to reporters that are covering things. Follow reporters that are doing things, see what they're working on. And you kind of build that relationship from afar. But I have a really good friend that writes for the Wall Street Journal, and she sends me bad pitches that she gets so I can share them with my staff. And but I mean, they're so unbelievable. It's not like, well, that wasn't so bad. No, it's like the dumbest crap I've ever seen in my life. It's like, this woman writes for the CFO Journal. So let's start. Do you know what a CFO is? I mean, she gets pitches for like basketballs. And it's like, what are you even talking about? So I think reporters will give you their time, attention, and patience if you're close and you've at least thought about it and researched it. They get, I've got reporter friends, because if you've ever been in a newsroom, they're open like this. And they said they'll hear people call, and they'll call this reporter, then call that, and they'll just start pinging through the newsroom. And they'll start yelling at each other. Go, here, you're next. It's like, or they'll start taking bets on who they're going to call next. And what's really funny is that there'll be times when they'll get the right reporter, and the reporter will go, yep, that's a story. Got to cover that. Want to do that? Let's talk today at 2. And they'll call another reporter and pitch another angle. Because they're going to cover it twice in the DBJ? What, are you insane? So I think there's a lot of common sense factor here. And so, and don't be afraid of it. And try email. Now, the average reporter will tell you they get about 150 pitches and news releases a day. So, but if 145 of them are crap, you'll get there. And then if you can build that relationship. And then you've got outlets like, let's look at BizWest, which is, it's kind of the Denver Business Journal, but there's Boulder and Northern Colorado. Jensen Worley there she will listen to any entrepreneur anytime. She wants that input. She loves to hear directly from CEOs. She's just a delightful person to work with. So if you call up and say, I've got a Boulder business, here's a piece of timely news. And I think that's the other thing people kind of lose track of. The best way to get hooked into it is like, this happened today. I got an investment, or I just signed a deal with Google, or something happened, as opposed to, you should write about me because I'm interesting. It's like, okay. But yeah, if you've got a piece of timely news, and Jensen does not have the $10 million floor, by the way. In fact, I will tell you, they watch the Edgar filings on the SEC. Any Boulder County company gets an investment, it is their policy they will write about it. $25,000, they don't care. They'll be on the phone trying to call. They want to cover the business. So the last thing I'll talk about is what we call newsjacking, and we've kind of touched on this. Blizzard coming, I own a daycare center. Here's 3 great ideas to do with kids when snow comes. That's newsjacking, just jumping into the middle of those stories and saying, I can help, I'm an expert, I can give you an idea. They also look for what's called sidebars. So if they're covering a big story, so like the great example, the NBC movie of the week on bulimia, and here's the sidebar from Dr. John who talks about bulimia. So you can do that. Repurpose and do it with a passion. So one of my favorite things that I see people do is when if you're at the stage where you're writing a couple of news releases and then people take the news release and they stick it on their blog. Now think about that. I just saw your news release online and I clicked for more information and I saw the same damn thing on your blog. Missed opportunity, right? Develop some context around it. If somebody's interested enough in your news release to click on it, you've got a chance to tell them more on your blog. Now you're talking to somebody that actually came here, you can make it longer. The average news release, by the way, 400 words. According to the AP, your lead should be 30 words or fewer, right? So these are not, I see, believe me, I laugh at them with my reporter friends. That, I've seen leads that are this long. And this is my own pet peeve, but my reporters will back me up. You are not the leading goddamn anything, right? I hate that. It's like, MAPR agency, the leading public relations firm. Shut up. You're the leading because somebody else says you are, not because you say you are. That is the most common thing that will get you laughed at by a reporter. So say what you are, say what you do, but don't be superfluous in that early sentence. If you're the largest and you can back it up, say you are. If you're the oldest and you can back it up, say you are. What does leading mean? You're really fast? You're out in front? It doesn't make any sense. So think about that. But as you think about it, or as you get a news article and you repost it on your own blog, what a great opportunity to tell some more story about it, because somebody came there and went, I saw this article, I want to learn more. Now you can draw them in with some other things. The media loves it if you get an article and you share it on your LinkedIn, on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on your Instagram, whatever is appropriate for your business. The media loves that. Do it. Makes them really happy. So continue to share that. And that's also a great opportunity to write a little piece on top of it. So if you get a little article about yourself, what a great opportunity to say, really honored to be here, this happened, and by the way, come to our event next Tuesday night. We talked about this. You get one good idea and it can be a news release, it can be an infographic, it can be a white paper, it can be a whole series on LinkedIn, you can do all sorts of things with it. And just share your coverage. You think about it, I wasn't in my office today. I get a paper copy of the Wall Street Journal. I wasn't in my office today. There could be the perfect article for Doyle on page 2. Doyle won't see it because I'm not going to read yesterday's paper tomorrow. That one just went in the recycle bin. But if a friend saw it and puts it on LinkedIn or sends it my way, don't assume that just because you got into a huge publication, the whole world saw it. Reshare it. Make sure that people saw it. Yeah.
Maybe give an example and you tell me what's wrong. So if we have on the website, have a separate news area and a separate blog.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we have news, but in the news area, and that just goes as news.
Right.
Right. Blog has more interpretation, things like it's of something of interest. It's not news. It's an exploration of something. Okay.
Yes.
And then we use Hootsuite and divvy things up so that we Twitter and LinkedIn and pieces from the blog and or news, depending on how we set up everything. Is that in general okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that's important to do is and Hootsuite can get dangerous because it's real easy to write the perfect tweet and then stick it on Facebook and stick it on LinkedIn and so you want to vary it slightly because LinkedIn's a longer form, Twitter's a shorter form, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, to take that and say, look at my article on Twitter, here's why our CEO did this on LinkedIn, and just vary it slightly so you've got, kind of recognizing the differences in the audiences. But yeah, to take all those different pieces and do that. I could talk for another 20 minutes on newsrooms versus blogs and all that kind of stuff, but I always think newsrooms are to me, your audience there is reporters. You got a reporter's attention to do something. They want to go to your newsroom and see what coverage you've had, your news releases, and if I want more information, who do I call? So that's really important to have there. Photos, any assets, anything like that. And then your blog is more, I want to read a little bit more of a narrative. So I might scroll through here and look at things, but that's where you can repurpose your press releases. So what I a lot of times counsel my clients to do is, let's do a blog post that tells a little bit more of the story. And it's like, hey, if you want to see the press release, here's a link back over here. But in the meantime, let me tell you about why we did this and why we're proud of it. And then maybe talk, have some more quotes from your CEO, all those kind of things. So it gives you a little bit long form.
I think we try to do more op-ed in the blog.
Yes. Do remember a news release, the first word of news release is news. So if you want to say something that is a little bit, what I'll call puffery, if you will, make sure that kind of goes into a quote, because you can attribute that to somebody at your company. I think this is the greatest product ever, but you don't want to just say in the body of it, this is the greatest product ever. So, but yeah, on your blog, that's where you can really say, this is what works. Here's a customer that this helped out. And just tell more of a story. So again, if I saw the release and I click for more information, I don't just want to see this. Oh, I'm on a different page and the font's different, but it's the same words. So yeah, blogs, you be your own publisher. Email, I think people think email marketing is like, oh, that's yesterday's news. This is a stat from the Direct Marketing Association. For every $1 spent on email, companies report that they make back $38, just under $40. So it's still really, really cost effective. And it can be, you comply with canned spam laws. My recommendation is to use something like Constant Contact or MailChimp or one of those. They will keep you in line. They won't let you do anything that's outside of the canned spam laws. They're really good about if somebody unsubscribes, they're unsubscribed. You don't make those mistakes. Plus, somebody did this in my company once. I can't remember what they did exactly, but they got enough complaints across Comcast about my domain that my domain got shut off by Comcast, and getting it turned back on was a living hell, right? If you do that through like a MailChimp, they whitelist with all the major carriers, so they won't let you make that mistake. And if somebody does make a mistake, it'll get intercepted before you get shut off by Comcast. It was a week of my life to convince Comcast that I had somebody went rogue and I fired them, which is a true story. And then always tie back into your social media. We talked about this. You can talk to reporters. Reporters like it when you retweet them, when you feature them on Facebook, when you put them on LinkedIn. Say nice things about them. So linking. Link building, and I have an SEO expert that works for me. Her name's Amy, that's not me. But traditional link building's dead. 4 or 5 years ago, you could literally call and say, well, you link to me and I'll link to you and we'll do this. Google now basically says that's a wash. Not gonna hurt you, but it's not gonna help you. So now what you really wanna do is develop content that people want to link to. That's really the answer to SEO. I always say it this way. If somebody types in margarita recipe into Google, what Google wants to deliver is a page that says 1 part tequila, 1 part triple sec, 3 parts lime juice, whatever. They don't want to deliver to you, here's the 50 greatest margarita recipes in a book for $9.95. They want to get you to the information that you're looking for. So the more that you can develop content that people want to point to, that's the answer. And PR can really help with that, because news releases count. And if people pick up your news release and they link back to your site, that works. I always get a kick out of the spam that I get from, I think, Russia. But it's like, you're not page 1, position 1 in Google. You should fix that. There's literally no such thing. Google now delivers dozens of different kind of page 1s. So you think about it, if you Google a restaurant in Boulder, you get what they call the carousel, and you'll see a bunch of pictures up top. And that's influenced by a whole bunch of things. But Google is trying to say different people searching for different things want to see results in different ways, and they're guessing how to do that. So there really kind of is no page 1, position 1 anymore. And it's even starting to get a little bit fuzzy about, is that an ad? I can't really tell. It used to be in a box in a different color, and it's not really so much anymore. So, yeah.
So are you saying, so me on my work computer searching for best steakhouse in Boulder, I might get one set of results. Don on his, at home, on his iPhone, searching for the same thing, might get a completely different set of results based on his browsing history and location.
You're exactly right. I'll take out the word might. will.
Okay,
Yeah, Google.
that's what I thought.
Google is looking at all. So one of my favorite examples is like, if I type in Ford, right? I want to look for Ford. Google's going to probably deliver Ford Motor Company #1 to me. Then it's probably going to show me the closest Ford dealer. It's going to assume. Now, if I type in Ford and a whole bunch of times click on how to ford a river, Google's going to drop things into my browser that's going to change that all around, right? And so it's going to, my clients do this to me all the time. They're like, well, I typed in the name of my company and it came up position 1. It's like, yeah, because you go to your own website all the time, don't you? Yeah. That's how that works. And this is, if Amy were here, I'd have her tell you how to do it, but you can do a thing called a clean browser test, which does a couple of things. It masks you geographically, so Google can't really tell where you are. It masks your search history, and then we can actually start to say, okay, in a somewhat generic world, this is what this looks like, and this is where we are.
That's really good to
And
know.
yeah, and Google has some things, but yeah, it's not quite as bad as retargeting. But I actually, one of the things I love to do, this is my favorite weird, because I'm a geek. I like to leave Facebook open in this tab, and then Google really obscure diseases, and then see if I get ads in Facebook for it. And there's cures for stuff that I'm making it up, and it's like, do you have this? Yeah, if Zuckerberg doesn't. If he met me, he'd be like, "Oh, I need hand sanitizer."
Is that out of context of where we are to ask you how you feel about retargeting?
No, I don't think it is. I think retargeting can be wonderful. Personally, I'd rather see an ad for something that I want or that I'm looking for than feminine products. I'm not going to buy them my whole life. My only problem with retargeting is it seems to go on forever. Because, especially for something like, I remember I needed a washer and dryer. That was not something, mine was broken, my clothes were dirty. I needed to make a purchase within the next 72 hours, and how soon can you have it at my house? And for 6 weeks, it was like, hey, look at this one. It's like, I bought that. That ship sailed. So I think that is, is it cyber stalking? Yeah, it kind of is. But again, I'm kind of back to, I realize that this is the way the world works, and I would much rather have them serve me for restaurants in Boulder than restaurants in Atlanta. I'm not going there. I don't care how good the steak is. It's a long flight for a steak. So think about that and how you do that. And the last one, there are a number of newswires that you can buy your way onto. The two main ones are Business Wire and PR Newswire. They're also the two most expensive ones. Business Wire is actually owned by Berkshire Hathaway, the Oracle of Omaha. We have cornered their SEO experts we started doing some tests of putting news releases out for them, and they're $400 to $600 to $700 and even more to do a news release, even for just the state of Colorado. And we did SEO tests on our own, and for $165 on Globe Newswire, we got the exact same damn results. So what I call a wire and fire is sometimes we'll look at a client and go, this is kind of an okay piece of news. Let's not bug a ton of reporters with it. Let's not pitch it too hard, but let's spend the $165 and put it on Globe Newswire and stick it on your website because there's some SEO value to that. And it'll go into Yahoo News and Google News, and it'll go to those places, and it'll stay there, and it'll live there for a while. It's not tricking, and that's the one place where Google also allows duplicate content. I won't go deep into canonical copy and duplicate content and all that, but it used to be you could have 10 blogs, and this was a big trick. You'd have 50 blogs actually, and you'd write one blog post, and you owned them all, and they had different URLs, and they all pointed to each other, and you got to be page 1, position 1. Google figured that out. So duplicate content, watch that really closely because Google will penalize you for that. But they realize that news releases are supposed to be repeated, so they kind of let those go. So they see it come through. So I just did one today for a client who the news is kind of out there. It wasn't huge news. It wasn't great news, but it's worth $165. Let's put it out there, put it on your website, do some work on it. And then when somebody's looking for you, they're in fundraise mode right now, and they're looking, and it comes up in Google that, hey, this is a cool thing that happened to this company. That's all right. And I'm sorry, they just changed. If you type in Globe Newswire, you'll get there. They just got acquired by somebody, and they just got a new name 3 days ago. There's also, I'm sorry.
They should do a press release.
Yeah, they have, believe me. I got an invoice from them, and we send out a ton of releases, like $3,000 invoice. Like, who the hell are you? It's like, oh, that's those guys. And then there's another one called, it's owned by Cision. And I'm drawing a blank, but if you type in Cision is CISION, that one's also in the $150-ish range. PR Newswire is much more. Business Wire is much more. They say they do more. I believe this with all my heart. The only reason I put my client's release out on the wire is for Google and SEO purposes. I've never put a release on the wire, sat back and gone, bring on the phone calls. It just, Apple gets away with that. My clients don't, right? So this, again, I don't want to go into a ton of nuances about sometimes we don't put them on the wire because we just want to pitch them. Sometimes we don't do releases at all, but that's not a bad tactic to get out there. And it can kind of make you look a little bit bigger when all of a sudden somebody Googles you and it's like, wow, here's a piece of news. In fact, I am threatening, and I'm finally going to follow through this year, I think. I want to do a piece of empirical research. I don't think the average consumer can tell a news release from a news article. I think when it comes up and says Globe Newswire, people don't go, oh, that's a news release. They go, I don't know what Globe Newswire is, but here's a story about this. Most people don't know about news releases. So I think that, and I don't say that like, hey, let's fool all the people and tell them stories, but it's just credibility for your company. And even if people do recognize it as a release, they go, well, that company's doing releases, so that's not a bad thing. And with that, questions, comments, criticisms, jokes about Bruce? Yeah.
Two things. One is GDPR. Do you look at that?
We do. We have a blog post up that will tell you exactly what you need to know about GDPR. And somebody at my company, much smarter than me, wrote it. So everybody know GDPR?
No. GDPR in hell right now.
Yeah, it's the new privacy law in Europe that can impact you if you, and it's.
Well, the similar one is on the ballot in California, or will be on the ballot in California. So if it hits California, it's the law in the U.S.
Yeah, which, so if any of you have wondered why every newsletter and every website you visit for the last month has been sending you, hi, we've updated our privacy policy. It's GDPR. So yeah, it is. It's important. Pay attention to it. Most of our clients weren't horribly impacted, but the Vicela stuff, that was a big deal. We maintained the website for a division of Coors, and that was a really big deal to go back on that. And
did you deal with
so,
it for MAPR? Like, I've been ignoring it because I'm like, I have a few clients that are probably emailing on my mailing list there, and I'm like, I really need to do this.
Well, here's a great example of the cobbler's kids always have the worst shoes. I think I'm editing the newsletter that we were going to send out last September. We've been so busy that we haven't done a ton of email work. But so after Brian on my staff wrote this really good blog post about it, I said, could you go look at the privacy on our website and make sure that we're not in any hot water since this is up here? But we haven't done an email for a while. But yeah, it is not to be trifled with. I mean, there's some question about, if France gets their shorts in a bundle and wants to come after you, what's their jurisdiction? But let's say for the sake of argument that, you just get the letter, then you got to call an attorney and deal with it. There's $500 and
You've already lost with that.
yeah, and there's not enough liquor in Boulder, right? So
Email lists are probably the biggest problem. I think digital marketing people don't know what's going to hit them in about 2 months. They're going to be realizing that it's hitting the fan. Because it's one thing to deal with it on a website, but the people that are doing digital marketing, which aren't even aware of GDPR as far as I can tell. I talk to SEO people all the time, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah.
I am getting some of those emails you're talking about from companies I've never heard of, and then I realize, oh no, somebody sold my email address to a company that's now wanting to be compliant, and I'm like, okay, delete.
It's and I get my clients call me all the time. They get those spam emails like, I've got an opt-in email list of 40,000 people in your industry, and they call me and go, we should buy this, huh? It's like, yeah, I got some seafront property in Nebraska I'll sell you for cheap too. But it's like, okay, first of all, guys, that's illegal. Second of all, When's the last time you let your email list go? Because they always come out around trade shows. So I had a client going to CES, like, we got all the CES people and these are opt-in lists. I said, you're going to CES, right? Yeah. Did you opt in to get a bunch of spam on your email? No. But you're at CES. Yeah. Anybody seen the disconnect here? That's this is garbage, right? And I actually set my email nomenclature up at my company. I can tell instantly when I'm getting, and I tell you what, those HubSpots and some of those, I'm sick of those emails that are like, hey, you must have missed my last email, so I assume either A, you've been captured by gorillas. Shut up. No, I can tell by the nomenclature that you either bought my name or guessed my name or skimmed my name somehow, because that's not my email address, even though it comes to me. And B, if I wanted to talk to you, I would have. So yeah. Yeah.
Unrelated to that, do you see much? Do you have to deal much with Black Hat SEO and responding to Black Hat SEO and reputation management stuff as a result of Black Hat?
You know, not a ton. Most of my companies are smaller companies. You know, they're mid caps. You know, a couple of my companies are $200-300 million range, and then we work with like NREL, some big organizations, but they're just not the victims of that. I have seen those things. I've never personally had to deal with a real, true reputation attack. And I don't.
I sat through some talks on Black Hat recently, and I was like, I just wanted to put my head down and cry, because like whatever you do in White Hat, what can be done to you in Black Hat is 10 times worse.
We had a guy, he lost a job that we were bidding on, and you were bidding on. He's a small guy, and we were the big guys. And he bombed all our Yelps and everything with like 1 star, like shitty ass ratings. And I researched him, and he's nuts. And I had my client, who ended up getting the job, mediate for us. And that person, my client, was so gracious, and we talked this. It makes me understand why people vote Trump and stuff like that after seeing this guy out there. That there's insane people out there, and my client negotiated for us, and the guy took it down and rescinded all the things. But it's and anything I would do if I contacted him, it would just make it worse. And, it was.
Yeah, every now and then you just get nuts, and I have 1-star review on Google from like 2011 because I had the audacity to tell somebody. They called me. And I said, I'm sorry, I have a direct conflict. I can't take you on. That's the ethical thing to do. And the review is something along the lines, this company clearly can't handle more than one client at a time. It's like, okay. So, so if somebody just decides to lose their mind, I mean, it's like you start to get into libel and slander and First Amendment side, and it's just tough.
I mean, a lot of the Black Hat stuff is not even libel or slander. I mean, you can build link networks that suck all the SEO review away from your website, for example. Yeah. Or you can, the whole, Cambridge Analytical stuff was Black Hat stuff that really had nothing to do with reality.
The good news is to really do a big, huge campaign like that takes some. I mean,
not anymore.
Yeah, it's still. I mean, depending on the size of your business, if you can do some. If you've got the skills to do it, but to do something on the scale of like what Cambridge did, there was 7 and 8 figures being spent, and that's that's ugly. But I have a client that has basically a search engine for the dark web. So if anybody's, what's amazing is, and nobody really knows how big the dark web is, but what's called the surface web, which is what Google sees, is something like 4 and 5% of the internet, and then the next level down is not bad stuff, but it's just think about all the things that you do that are connected, but they're behind a password. So it's your banking account, it's the Wall Street Journal, it's anything you need a password for. So that's that next level down, not necessarily nefarious, but just private, right? Then you got the dark web. And that's where drugs are sold, that's where horrible, illegal pornography, I mean, it's just ugly stuff. But my client has a tool that, here's how big it is. They scrape it in 50 some odd languages and basically make it searchable, because in the dark web, there is no Google, right? People go, I have 50,000 credit cards for sale. Somebody says, I'll take them. Boom, the site's down. It's gone in moments. So what these guys do is go out and crawl it. They are, I think, currently at about a 2 terabyte file that is kind of a snapshot they put over here into a file that clients can then search. And 2 terabytes is about 6 weeks worth of data on the dark web. So it's just ungodly massive. And they don't do any photos or graphics. They've come to the conclusion that they don't want to employ people that want to look at that all day. So it's only words. But we had a reporter from Channel 31 in the conference room one day, and he said, for example, what's, your email address is at what? And he said, at kdvr31.com. So he typed that into the search engine. And they said, oh, who's this right here? He goes, that's my boss. I go, is that our email password? He's like, shit, I don't know. So he calls her. He says, hey, so-and-so, is your email password this? She said, how'd you know that? It's like, it's on a projector in a conference room I'm in. And because, media, people are talking, so it's kind of, I've seen Hillary Clinton's social security number and her cell phone number, as well as Donald Trump's. It's all, we actually had the Secret Service in one day because there was what they considered to be a reasonably viable death threat raising money against Trump right before the election. And so we just said, look, here's what we have, and the Secret Service thought it was viable enough they came out. So it's, that's ugly stuff out there. But yeah, I almost promise you there's your social security numbers floating around out there. What do you do? But it's crazy. So the reason this company does that is it's kind of one line of defense in cybersecurity. So their clients are like major banks so a lot of times and I'm going to use Citibank as an example, not that they're even a client, but if Citibank realizes that 100,000 credit card numbers are in the wild and they can go, oh, all those came from Cleveland, they at least know where to start the triage in the event of a breach. So it's just kind of one part of a cybersecurity platform. Yeah.
One other thing, AIs, have you started to look at that?
Yes. I have a client. What's that?
How close are we to having one?
No.
I actually,
I feel like we already have one.
We have Alexa already.
Yeah, I actually have a client that has a product that you could pull up to a McDonald's and order at the drive-thru and not realize you weren't talking to a human. And it will automatically switch to a dozen different languages. I flipped into German midstream and it just switched for me. So yeah, it's really close. As far as this kind of stuff, I think it's, you probably, I think we all talk to robots in chat rooms and whatnot far more often than we think. I think there's some goods and bads to that, but it's going to,
even on the Alexa side. So if you go up and ask Alexa, more to your point of what you were talking about with Google and how it adjusts to you, AIs actually do more of that. So there's a central Alexa, and then there's your version of Alexa,
right,
which has then memorized everything it can about you to change how it responds to you.
Yep.
And so how do you even do SEO? How do you do, if IBM wants Google Home to, when I say, what is IBM? It should say International Business Machines, which has been around since blah, blah, blah. And
right.
Generally does, because it mostly goes to Wikipedia at the moment.
Right.
But we're changing where I train because I have my Alexa call me the highest ruler as my name and stuff like that. So it adjusts to me, and so when I ask at IBM, it tells me something different because I've kind of told it that my interests are
right
over here, right?
Right. Well, and Google's doing the same thing. It's what we talked about. So when you say, how do you do SEO against that? In theory, I only want to get to you if you want to get to me, right? Go back in the days of the internet when you could, actually put tags in that were invisible, and people would put porn, sex. So they'd come up in search engines. But if I'm looking for that and I'm selling cookbooks, who cares that you saw me, right? So if we can harness the combination of you trained it, but then based on how you've trained it, what I'm offering makes sense to you, then the training will work. I can get in front of the right people. I'd rather be in front of one person that wants to buy from me than 100 people that I'm pissing off. And that's where I think it's going to go, but there's going to be some bumps in the road on the way. Big time bumps in the road. Siri and I chat a lot. I call Siri a lot of names when it's like, play this playlist on my HomePod. And it's like, you don't have a playlist. I did 20 minutes ago when you were playing it. So Cool. Well, I think Bruce is going to kick us out here pretty quick. Any other questions? I'm happy to stay and chat, but I also don't, if people have places to be, like happy hour or,
Can I ask
yeah.
one question? What third-party like platforms or services do you use as an agency to discover journalists that might cover topics of interest, and also like for reporting or monitoring? Because I know there's like a million of them.
Million,
out there.
yeah. As far as the database, we use Cision at our office. There's Cision, there's Media Atlas, and every year when the contract comes up, I refer to it as the tallest midget competition because they all suck. But they're a good starting point. My biggest problem with those is supposedly you can crowdsource. So like I can go in and type in that Alicia Wallace is no longer at the Cannabist here at the Denver Post. She's taken a position over here. And that could be 6 months before that ever happens. So we use it as a good starting point. They're not cheap is the problem. What I hate about them the most is they all have the ability for me to go in and type in a keyword, software. And then I can get 2,000 reporters that all cover software. And I can then type in one email and push one button and I can spam all 2,000 of them. You get caught doing that at my company, and you'll be very happy someplace else. Give me your computer on the way out the door. But people do that all the time, and that's why reporters, I mentioned, get 150 a day. 148 of them are probably crap. So we use those as a starting point. You go in, you get software, and then you start to narrow it down. Then you look and you go, okay, there's 4 people writing software at this publication. Then you go look at each one of those reporters and say, who's writing something closest to the software that I want to talk to them about? And then usually if you call a reporter email and say, hey, I really couldn't tell if this was you or your colleague Carolyn. Can you help me out here? If you're that close, they'll usually go, it definitely me or definitely Carolyn. Thanks so much for asking. So those are good. Short of paying thousands of dollars a year for one of those, Google Alerts and just Google searches can really build some pretty decent lists. We use those as a kind of a jump start because if I can build a list in 3 hours versus 8 hours, that's just better all the way around, and I can amortize that out over 50, 60 clients. As far as media monitoring, I use Google Alerts. We signed up for our first paid media, and there's a million of them. There's Meltwater, and there's also, unless you're getting hundreds, if not thousands of clips a day, Google Alerts and just being vigilant will probably get you exactly what you need. We use, and I can't remember the name of the company because we just signed up for them, but because we're doing all this stuff on TV with our DropSound client, we have a video monitoring service, and the reason for that is twofold. It's hard to search into video still a lot of times, so if we just type in Vizsla, even if we know the TV station, we have to go look for it if they don't happen to put the name in the text. And then there's rights. So if Vizsla wants to put them on their website, we have to use a service to make sure the rights come along with it so we can do certain things with it. And that one was pretty cheap. I think it's $275 a month for them to monitor, and $130 a clip. So for I'm not going to find a clip out of Dallas, Texas, and I certainly wouldn't have rights. So that worked out pretty well. But we do not pay for media monitoring service because I think they suck, and I think they're really expensive. And like I said, unless you're doing huge global searches, Apple probably needs one.
But aren't some of those going to go away with Gdpr? And because a reporter could go to this service and say, take me out of your database. You know what I mean?
Well, because what these are, in theory, reporters could do that now. In theory, it could, but the monitoring service is not so much because the monitoring service is just scraping. The reporter wrote this is out there, and here you go. As far as the decisions in those, in theory, a reporter could do that, but a reporter will say a good PR person is great. I wouldn't have a friend at the Wall Street Journal if I was just spamming and sending her basketball stuff all the time. So they realize that there's some I want to be found to some degree. And then, you can always be found just because when you're writing things in public, you're going to be found. So we'll see where that goes. Like I said, I've seen reporter profiles that are like, don't email me, don't call me, all PR people suck. And it's like, and they're friends of mine. And I call them all the time. So, we'll see where that goes. It'll be interesting to see how this all. Yeah, the right to be forgotten is going to be interesting in a myriad of different applications. Yeah, Kira.
I haven't done too much research on GDPR yet, but is it Do you recommend for clients in any industry who maintain an email list and send email newsletters update their privacy policy to reflect that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's something that I don't think is on our radar.
And I'm really big with my clients on just complying with canned spam, not only just the letter of the law, but just at the end of the day, don't be that guy. It's if you think you've got an email newsletter that is of value, do what you're going to do, send it out. And if somebody says no, thank you, okay, that's cool. Just comply.
We use MailChimp, so we have that stuff handled.
Yeah.
We have a lot of clients in the healthcare industry, so we have to be careful about HIPAA.
Yep.
And yet, most of our clients are not very tech savvy, and I don't think they know what this is. And I'm kind of the tech point person.
Well, and HIPAA's tough. I mean, we've done a lot of work in healthcare. It's like if I'm filming you and doing an interview and you're the doctor and a patient walks behind you, stop filming. I either have to have a HIPAA release from that person or I can't use that clip anymore. It's that. We had I will never forget this. We were working with Health One, and a nurse on her personal Facebook page posted something to the effect of, my patient Stevie came in today and he had his shot and he didn't cry for the first time and it was so wonderful. It was great. And her, Health One saw it, called her in. Do you have permission? No, I don't. The parents were like, we're cool with it. We're fine. But because we didn't do it in advance, just to cover their butts, they suspended her for 30 days because it was, name, procedure. It was all the things. And then it was a kid to boot. And so, they called us in to do a ton of social media training for people. And it was the most innocent thing. And the parents thought it was wonderful. There were tears. It was just an awful thing. But, there's always unintended consequences, right? The right to be left alone. And now all of a sudden, I can't get to the right reporter, and the reporter would really like this story. So
we talked about this a lot in the roundtable thing the other day. You missed, but
I was slacking.
One of the other agencies that was there was talking about how as long as they use all these platforms, MailChimp and so on and so forth, and so they're taking care of it. And so those companies were worrying about it because they use the platforms, and those platforms deal with it, so they weren't going to deal with it themselves because the platforms take care of it. Was their opinion.
There is some question as to how GDPR overlays with that on some other different things, because there's even some things like, the platform took you off the email list, but do I still have you in this database over here, and where does GDPR come into that? And if it's, it's...
And if you do a manual upload of a CSV or an XLS that contains email addresses, if your client does that, without telling the PR firm, and it's like, oh, I got all these email addresses. We had that happen a couple months ago, and the client didn't tell us they were doing it, and we don't know where these email addresses came from, but a lot of them were bogus. Client got in trouble.
Our biggest thing is we went in and just did a search on all the privacy policies of all our partners, and everybody who doesn't have one from this year is on the bad list. Right. So it says privacy policy 2013. They're not GDPR.
Let's go ahead and wrap up here. Do we have one more question, or we'll wrap up and talk a
Anyway,
little bit
yeah.
afterwards?
So I was wondering, with the Cambridge Analytical thing, I don't know if you have statistics or anything, but is Facebook less valuable as a platform now?
It depends on who you ask. Wall Street says they're doing just fine. I think Facebook needs to decide what it wants to be when it grows up. Because if you put Zuckerberg in a corner, he says, hey, we're not a news platform. It's just whatever people post. We're cool. But then we saw this whole thing go on. So now they've kind of come out and said, we're going to do better about trying to separate. This is real news. This is something somebody made up. This is, is it thumbs up, thumbs down? Yeah, it's a hard question. I don't have a good answer for you. I think at its very core, I think the fact that we don't teach critical thinking anymore in schools is, sometimes I look at this stuff and go, who got fooled by that? Seriously? You seriously got fooled? But it's, there's a great book called Asking the Right Questions, which was written, I think, in the 60s or early 70s. And it's a reporter's book about critical thinking and second sourcing and double sourcing and all sorts of things. And yet, in the heat of the moment, sometimes we can all get caught. I remember the day that Michael Jackson and Farrah Fawcett died on the same day. And Twitter was kind of new then. And somebody tweeted that Harrison Ford died that day. And I was like, shit, they're dropping like flies. And then I was like, I felt terrible. But that was the time I got caught. So So yeah, to answer your question, I don't know if it's more valuable or less valuable. I love the fact that there's social engagement. I just think it, are you a way to keep up with grandma and say hi, or are you a news outlet? It's not dessert topping and floor wax. You got to be one or the other, So. Thanks for coming, everybody. Wait. Oh, thanks, Kara.
This video was produced by Boulder Digital Arts. BDA offers affordable, cutting-edge classes and workshops for designers, entrepreneurs, and tech professionals. All of their programs are taught by industry experts. And as a small local business, they're proud to have supported Boulder's creative and technology community for well over a decade. BDA's classes cover a wide range of subjects, from digital marketing and video production to web development and graphic design. Learn more at boulderdigitalarts.com.